If you guys are starting to tune in, I'll be right with you. Just waiting to get the other part started up. And we will be live. Welcome to the Healthy Mind. Thank you. This is Dr. Paul. We're about ready to kick this off. How you doing? I am Dr. Paul. Welcome to the Healthy Mind. Every morning I've been coming to you at 7 a.m. just to try to wish you a good morning, good blessing, and good life. We are here to discuss the healthy mind. We've been talking over this week on loneliness. Today's Thursday. So happy Thursday, today's Thursday, yeah. And what we want to discuss today is we're going to go over some of the science part and some of the healing parts at the same time. So I won't take up too much of your time. If you have any questions, please put it in the comments and below, and I will get to it as I look through all the different medias. If you missed the show and you want to share the show, you can either share it on your Facebook, which is if you're watching on Facebook, share it on Facebook. But you can also get it to my YouTube channel, Dr. Paul Dyer Grandmaster. So you can go to my YouTube channel and then share the link that way. So loneliness, we have talked about the different brain functions before and how they affect you and how you are caused by the different effects of what you're thinking and what you're processing. Well, this is still the same principle, because in the principle of knowing what you are thinking and your thoughts are, it's important. Okay, so in that importance, we decide how we're going to live by the thing we actually believe in, that functions, right? So let's just go with some of the things with loneliness. Now, if no one's ever told you the word or taught you the word, you probably already know the definition. And it's fascinating that without even, I don't know how many people look up the word or the definition of loneliness. If you probably ask a young child, they would probably just give you an answer, and they'd probably be right. Why is that? We know it's sad and unhappiness, but it's also social distancing. Yeah, social distancing, and that's really important. And distance. It's social distancing. If it's social distancing as part of the definition of loneliness, then that's why you're feeling what you're feeling now in this time of this situation of stay at home. If you don't know why you are feeling kind of heavy, it's because you're social distancing. Social distancing occurs in sickness and the sickness of the cells. Now, that's fascinating, right? Because when you think that we have over 100 trillion cells, why is that important? Because each cell has its own memory. Each cell has its own memory. Each cell has its own function. Each cell, that's why when we do genetics or when you replace cells into another body, it duplicates, it can replicate for the healthy healing part of it, right? Because each cell has its own, think about its own mind, right? Its own brain and its own function. Then how does the 100 trillion cells function in the body? They grouped together. So even cells in the single form of life know that grouping together makes them a stronger entity. That's how it works. Now, most of that grouping together is part of surviving together. So cells know to group together to survive, to be stronger. Now the information the cells share information of the action. So if you have a cell in the liver, cell in the lung, cell in the heart, all these cells group together to understand the information of what they need to do. Now, a lot of the times when you are feeling loneliness, it's almost that you feel it in it's biological, right? It's a biological imperative that where you feel it's almost in a gut feeling. And the reason why you're feeling in a gut feeling is because of this vagus nerve. Vagus nerve. I'm not going to give you a background drop, but it's the longest nerve in the body, right? I think it's the 10th cranial nerve, I believe. So, but the vagus nerve it starts producing what you call in that second stomach. Now, when you have loneliness, one of the things you start to feel is that you start to have your heart gets a little bit thick, gets a little bit like pressure, and you start to feel sick because loneliness affects directly the heart, small intestines, So it affects the heart and the small intestines. Also, loneliness also affects the spleen and the stomach. Now, it goes down to the different organs and affects them differently. For instance, the heart and the small intestines, they fluctuate and they get sick off of anxiety, despair, nervousness, abandonment, betrayal, love unreceived. Your heart and your small intestine starts to feel that. If you have any questions, the reason I'm checking to make sure you know when to ask questions on YouTube also or on Facebook, because I don't want to jump ahead if you have a question that you want to look at. So your heart and your small intestines, and this is just from loneliness, from social distancing, and even the cells know, the 100 trillion cells you have, and we've been studying this. We as the science world, our living human beings have been studying loneliness, social distancing, because of the cause and effect even on our animals. You know, they've tested it on mice. Mice will get sick just by introducing a certain drug in mice. You separate them, they have all died. You bring them back together, they have a 90% chance of all living with only few deaths. So think about it. You introduce a sickness to certain size of mice, you separate them, they all die. You take that group, you put them in the same sickness, ingest it into the mice, you keep them together, 90% lives. 90% lives. Why do you think that is? Because social distancing causes a sickness. Why? Because then it causes a brain chemistry. And then we start going back into brain functions, right? Then remember, our mind can be tested with a magnetic wave, right? You can test, because we're receivers and producers. So we are a single cell organism as human beings, and other human beings are a single cell organism. And if you look at it that way, we are transmitting to each other. That's why when you have 100 trillion cells, your mind governs. Your mind does the governing of your trillion cells. Think about that. If your mind is governing the trillion cells, that means what you are thinking, your thoughts, creates. Your thoughts create. Look at it. Loneliness, social distancing, sadness, unhappiness. Your mind is the governs the 100 trillion cells, so your thought creates. In your thought creation, because we talked about consciousness last week. So consciousness, we know that consciousness, that most of the people live in a subconscious world, right? So 95% of your living is done by subconsciousness. 95% of your living is done by your subconsciousness. That's in your repetitive action over and over. This is why loneliness and sadness can be such a hardship on you, because it's taking you out of normal or nomadic living, right? And as it takes you out of nomadic living, then where is the other 5%? The 5% is consciousness. Running out of room, but you know what I mean. 5% is consciousness. So how do you know when you're conscious? Is when you are active thinking. When you actively start to think, this 5% changes to 90% of consciousness. This is why love is so important. Love, when you are in love, processing love, and choose to love, the other abandonment, betrayal, anxiety, despair, nervousness goes away. But you can be nervous in love, but it's a different vibrational energy that sends out. That's the difference when you have love. When you are actively thinking, then you become 90% consciousness. So that means you're thinking about what you're doing instead of the subconscious running just the regular programming. And you can train your subconscious to change its habits into a new format by actively thinking on a conscious level. It changes the social distancing of your subconsciousness. Now it becomes a new program from your active thinking. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because if you're okay, look at it this way. You know how when you work out and you're weak, say you're weak doing push-ups, and when you're working out and you're weak doing push-ups, you're unable to do 5 push-ups, but you keep working at it. You start to train the muscle into being able to do. Well, your brain is the same way. Once you start actively thinking, actively participating, actively breathing, actively putting together a practice, training, and actively having faith, you start to reprogram the subconscious. Because the subconscious, if you don't reprogram it, it's going to be 95% of your subconscious, 95% of the subconscious is going to run you and rule you. And then that's going to go back into your sadness and unhappiness of your social distancing. This is where the phrase or the formulating of the words going, whatever you think you are, whatever you think you are, I think, therefore I am. You are. Because if you stay in the Darwinian theory, right? And the Darwinian theory is that everybody's out for themselves and it's nothing but creating havoc, and then I have to protect myself. Well, because social distancing does that, you go into survival mode. And once you go into survival mode, you start to predicate it on fear becomes your active participant. That's why your vagus nerve starts to give you sickness in the gut. That's why your small intestine your heart doesn't feel well, your stomach doesn't feel well, your spleen doesn't feel well, because fear starts to shut down the response of healing in your different organs. So it goes back into fear. if you're not actively thinking, then your subconscious is going to work its way from a fear response. Kind of like if you're back in the old way of running from a saber-toothed tiger. It has to. Your subconscious is going to fall back, and what falls back into the fear component? We talked about the amygdala, right? The freeze, flight, or flight, right? The oldest part of your brain. If you're running your subconscious at 95%, and you become social distancing, is your loneliness, then you start to base yourself on fear, and that's where you're going to be acting in. But if you're an active participant in thinking, you change the 5% of consciousness into 90% of consciousness, then you change your fear to love, then these don't get sick, because the mind governs. The mind is what governs. Loneliness will cause the effect if you don't know what the effect it is causing. Loneliness will cause an effect if you don't understand the effect it is causing. It's important to understand that your mind governs. This is why we call it the healthy mind. If you understand how your mind is governing, then you understand the process of your body. You don't have to understand biology or chemistry or physics to know that when you start to actively think and participate in the process of health, eating right, living right, loving, receiving, sending to all cells. Remember, if you look at yourself as one single cell, we socially interact with other human beings like another single cell. This is what we do. This is what our vibration do. Our heart vibrates from 16 feet. They can tell from different materials of the magnetic waveform when they test brain waves, how much it sends out into 10 feet. 16 feet from the heart, 10 feet. So we're transmitting our thoughts. And that's why we rebound or we receive other people, negatively or positively. Because we're cells, right? That's how cells interact. That's how cells stay together. Because we're social animals. And this social distancing, we have to know to keep safe. But staying social distancing into a love and effect of why we're doing this, how we're doing this. So yeah, in a way, it's kind of like the old Beatles song, Choose Love. Love is all you need, love is all you need. Because love will change the active thinking part of your consciousness of 90%. Because once you fall into fear, then you're going back to the 5% consciousness, and 95% of the subconsciousness is what's creating, and your mind is governing your thoughts. See how that shifts? Epigenetics says this. You got to remember what your body is made out of, right? Your body is made out of different, like 65% oxygen. You got hydrogen in there, right? Your body is a functional process of you. You understand what hydrogen is. You understand what calcium is. This is why eating right, eating different foods, exercising changes the whole chemistry in our body. Because if you're anxious because of loneliness, you decrease your oxygen level in the cell, in your body. And if the body is made of 65% oxygen and 62% water, and you're depleting that by fear, anxiety, then what do you think is going to have the effect on your heart and small intestines and your spleen, your stomach, and so on? So this is how the chemistry rolls through. Okay? Again, I'm almost out of time. I only like to do about 20 minutes to keep you understanding. I'll be here tomorrow. Remember, understand what you're thinking because your mind governs, right? Understand the process. But if I could just say one thing, relish in love instead of anxiety and fear. Produce love. You say, well, love what? Love yourself. Understand what love is and let love release and accept love. Do that. And loneliness, even though we're social distancing, won't be as bad. That's what I'm going to tell you. Won't be as bad. And that's important. Okay? Stay healthy. Stay blessed. Stay at home. Make sure you do your meditation. Make sure you do your prayers. Make sure you do your exercises. Remember, we are working on our plan of action to be a healthier you so we can come back into our new normal. If you have any questions, contact me on drpaulholisticscience.com, or you can always inbox me here or any other social medias. I appreciate you, and you guys have a great, great day.